Hello, everyone. I'm seeing people entering in the chat. We will just wait a couple of minutes and we will start soon. I think that we can proceed. So welcome everyone to the third and final session of this community of practice. As previously introduced, this is a series of 3 facilitated workshops organized by the UNDP and ARUP under the Urban Imaginaries program. The first workshop we had was focused on how to build a compelling funding proposal that would attract the interest and align with the donors' value, while the second one was focused more on the exploration of diverse funding streams, and we presented how green and municipal bonds can be used in different contexts. Today, this is the last session, and we will explore the sector of green and sustainable finance through a panel discussion with our guest Igor Janets from EBRD and with Alice Charles from ARUP. But just before we start this session, I would like to ask everyone to join us on a small exercise that we are going to do once again through Mentimeter. So please scan the code that you see on your screen or digit www.menti.com and add the code that you see on the screen. I will leave this slide for a couple of seconds and then I'm going to move through the other screen and launch it. Let me see. Let me know if it works for everyone. In case you can type it in the chat and we will try to help you find your way. So just 1 second, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and coming to the Mentimeter. Here we are. I'm going I think you should be able to see my full screen at this moment. So our first question together is, which session have you been attending? You can, of course, select more than one. We are interested to see if you were already with us before or if this is your first session. Okay. We see people going through the whole series. We are very happy to see this because we are building upon the knowledge that we are building in this session. So it's very nice to see that people are coming and you are interested in what we are saying. See more votes coming. Very nice. Our second question is more connected with the session that we have today, and is, what do you see as the biggest risk in securing financing in your project? So we have different options. You can rate them from the one that is more visible in your context to the one that is less relevant. And we have lack of capacity, credit worthiness, repayment risk, and political risks. Yes, we are seeing how there are many interconnected challenges that we are facing. And hopefully through this session, you will learn more about how to cope with certain situations that you might face at the moment, or your country or your region. Lack of capacity, I see popping out. Hopefully we will give you more clarity about the topic. And last, we want to know what are the 3 sectors of sustainable finance that you're more interested in. At this moment, we identified 6 just for the sake of this small exercise, and we have green jobs, renewable energy, agriculture, green building, green infrastructure, and waste management. We ask you to pick the 3 most relevant in your context. I see already some alignment on renewable energy, green infrastructure, but also waste management and green building, green jobs. Those are very interconnected. So we know that you cannot talk about one without also implementing some of the others. So we are really happy to see where are the touch points that we are going to use also for this conversation. Perfect. At this moment, I just would like to thank you for your answers. We will still collect them throughout the exercise, but at this moment, I will leave the floor for our panel discussion to Alice Charles that will introduce our guest and present the topic. To you, Alice.
Hi, everyone. It's really good to see you. And that was a very useful exercise, actually, to understand the issues that are most pertinent to you, but also understand the projects that you're trying to finance. And as we have the discussion this morning, we'll try and weave that into the discussion. So what are we going to do? So we have Ihar from the EBRD, who's going to be our expert panelist. And what we're going to endeavour to do today is to improve your understanding of green and sustainable financing in the urban sector. And I guess our principal objective is to, first of all, ensure that you understand how you can better prepare projects so that you can attract investment, but also not just to think about the individual project, but thinking about how you could bring a pipeline of projects together, which may prove more investable in the long run. So first of all, what I'm going to do is try and set the scene a little bit in terms of the green and sustainable urban financing scene, have a discussion with Ihar, and then I'm going to try and wrap up the discussion. Just to let you know, this will be followed by Aditi, who will moderate a Q&A. So as you go along, don't be afraid to drop questions into the chat, which Aditi will pick up at the end of the discussion. So first of all, just in terms of setting the scene, we know that the cities that we live in around the world are at the centres of GDP. 80% of our GDP comes from cities, but equally we know that 75% of our emissions come from cities, which often makes the Secretary General raise the point that if we are going to tackle the climate crisis, that the battle for climate will either be won or lost in cities. So it's imperative that we focus on realising the SDGs and the Paris Agreement in the city-related context. But that will take money. And that will take a lot of money. And the estimates that are out there, you see estimates from the World Bank, you see estimates from what was the Global Infrastructure Hub, which is now incorporated into the World Bank, and many other organizations, but many of them say that that will take 4.5 to 5.5 trillion of investment in cities up to 2030. So that's an enormous sum of money. Yet, we traditionally have had a situation where multilateral development banks actually contract with with countries if they are seeking to fund city projects. And, if there's, we've seen that you brought up political risk, if there's a difference of political persuasion between national government and city government, that can cause various problems. Thankfully, the EBRD is definitely paving a new path in that the EBRD is very advanced in terms of working with cities and municipal lending, and we'll hear a little bit more about that as the discussion progresses. But if we think about city development projects, we know that they have major potential in terms of not only bringing the transformation of our cities as a whole, but also boosting our resilience, enhancing nature positivity, and also addressing climate action. So they similarly can improve the inclusivity of our cities, and as we seek to transform our cities, we can also leverage the latest digital innovation in doing so to get the maximum returns on what we do. So it's imperative in terms of approaching any project that you ensure that you properly design, prepare, and look at all the financing options that are available to you to finance that project and build it properly. So, what cities need to do to finance the projects that they're bringing forward is not only leverage new sources of financing, but equally traditional sources of financing. And the likes of the EBRD programme is imperative in that regard. In accessing financing, cities face many challenges. You have highlighted already, for example, political risk is a major challenge in the Mentimeter, but equally capacity and expertise is a major challenge. And what we find is that often cities are lacking experts within the city with financing backgrounds who therefore, do not know how to prepare a project with the risk structure and profile to attract investment. And that's where the likes of the EBRD come in as well, because they can also provide technical assistance to cities to help you properly prepare the project. The other thing that we consistently hear is that cities do not engage the private sector early enough. And if you think about the urban value chain and what it takes to prepare a project, the private sector will be engaged to some degree right across that value chain. So the public sector may lead on the planning of the project. They're often assisted by the private sector. The private sector may take a leading role in financing the project. So, you may have blended financing solutions that may not just be state funding, or MDB funding. So they're often engaged early. And what we hear as a result of the private sector not being engaged early enough is that often we see cities not procuring the right thing, or we see cities not preparing the project in such a way that it will be considered bankable. We also see that many cities lack access to international finance, and that can be related to creditworthiness. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit in the panel. But also cities can have an issue in terms of exchange rate risk. And also what we found in the last number of years, particularly, for example, with COVID, is that many cities around the world lack emergency funding budgets. So if there's an emergency need for a project or a piece of infrastructure, they often lack the ability to get that underway. But there are a lot of things that cities can do and to overcome that. And what they need to do is ensure that they open themselves up to accessing a diverse range of revenue sources. And there are things that cities need to do to make sure that they are going to attract that investment. So one thing is they need to get their own house in order and collect their own source revenues and combine that own source revenues at the local and national level with private sector investment, international MDB financing, and to a lesser extent, some cities we see also leverage philanthropy to assist them. So today we're gathered here with many of you cities who have either been part of the UNDP Urban Imaginaries programme recently, or you're part of the alumni. And of course, what you have been doing is identifying the critical project that you want to bring forward, looking at the business case for that project. And you've been through exercises in terms of design thinking and foresight and systems thinking, which are incredibly important to make sure that you're creating the right vision, preparing the project effectively, but also you have been hearing about various sources of finance. So today, what we're going to hear specifically about is the EBRD Green Cities programme. And if you're not familiar with this programme, it in essence has three central components: the preparation of green city action plans, but also sustainable infrastructure investment, so actually financing, but also capacity building. And we're going to hear a little bit more about that shortly. So now, without further ado, what I'd like to do is introduce Ihor. And if I could ask you, in introducing yourself, if you could also tell us not just about yourself, your role, your organization, and what you do, but also specifically a little bit about the Green Cities program of the EBRD. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Alice. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on your time zone. My name is Igor Knyazyev, and I'm a principal banker responsible for the development and implementation of projects in the municipal sector, mainly in Ukraine. The EBRD is committed to improving municipal infrastructure in line with its mandate to build open and sustainable market economies. The municipal sector covers investments and services under the ultimate responsibility of municipalities, whether provided by public or private entities. Our core objective in the municipal sector is to promote greater efficiency and higher quality in the provision of municipal services through investment and the promotion of independent, well-managed, and financially sustainable operations. In Ukraine, for instance, we work in 5 municipal subsectors: district heating, water and sanitation, municipal solid waste management, public transportation, and energy efficiency in public buildings. Whereas over the 8 gigawatts of Ukraine's generating capacities have been destroyed or severely damaged because of the war, jointly with my colleagues, I also work on the heat and power cogeneration projects, liquidity support for municipalities, as well as other ad hoc projects that ensure provision of critical municipal services during electricity outages. Starting from February 2022, EBRD invested over 5 billion euros in Ukraine, and a significant share of these investments is related to the support of infrastructure, including municipal infrastructure. At present, we have approximately 50 municipal projects covering most of large cities in Ukraine. Obviously, the mechanism of our cooperation with municipalities depends upon the regulatory framework of a country. In most cases, we try to work directly with municipalities, providing loans and investment grants to municipal companies on the basis of municipal guarantees, without any property collateral. In some countries, we use sovereign guarantees and project support agreements. In Ukraine, the minimum size of the loan is 8 million euros, while the maximum size can be as high as 150 million. The usual tenor of the loan for CapEx projects in the municipal sector is between 10 and 15 years, with a grace period of up to 4 years. For the liquidity support projects, the maximum tenor is shorter, it's 5 years. The size of investment grants varies depending upon project essence and other factors, but we definitely try to provide blended financing, including investment grants. Each transaction is supported by TC grants to finance consultants. We usually have at least due diligence or feasibility study consultants, as well as consultants responsible for project implementation support. There was a question regarding Green City program. Indeed, to provide a comprehensive support to municipalities in our countries of operation, several years ago, EBRD launched a Green Cities program, which inter alia stipulates development of Green City Action Plans, also known as GCAPs. GCAPs help cities to assess key environmental and climate challenges, conduct public consultations with key stakeholders in order to have their feedback, identify priority areas of investments, evaluate the scope of such investments and potential approaches and technologies, and prepare a multi-year plan. So in essence, it's a holistic tool which gives city management and city councils an opportunity to compare and prioritize investments in different sectors. Ukraine has 7 green cities that are members of this program. In general, there are almost 50 cities in countries of our operation. Quite remarkably, 2 GCAPs in the Ukrainian cities of Khmelnytsky and Kiev were finalized during the war period. The documents took into consideration the war-related challenges, and they also integrated necessary adjustments linked to the influx of internally displaced people. And these are not just plans. For instance, in Khmelnytsky, we're financing 2 investment projects which were identified as high priority ones. This is a solid waste management project, as the city has one of the oldest and most dangerous landfills in operation in Ukraine. And a public transport project, which was identified as the highest priority during public consultations. I feel I should probably stop here.
That's a fantastic introduction to the program. And of course, you mentioned that 50 cities are part of the program. And just for the people who've joined us today, they cover places like Vilnius, Warsaw, across the Balkans, the Stans, and I'm even aware of some green city action plans being prepared in Morocco at the moment. So it is a program that you're rapidly expanding. In terms of the audience we have here, it would be really useful if perhaps we could, first of all, talk a little bit about what cities need to do to properly prepare project to attract investment. So perhaps you might tell us how you prepare the project, how you prepare the pipeline of projects, but also tell us a little bit about the capacity building and the technical support that you provide cities. And it would be great maybe if you could draw on an example to make it real for all the cities that's joining.
Well, it really depends upon the essence of a project. There is no quick answer, silver bullet. If we talk about simple projects with shorter payback periods, probably it makes perfect sense to approach private investors first. For instance, if the city needs a large parking in downtown, it is faster and more efficient to arrange a tender among potential private investors. However, if the city needs to rehabilitate its aging infrastructure, such as a wastewater treatment plant or district heating system, with significant environmental and social benefits, but a rather long payback period and many regulatory and institutional challenges, then it's a good idea to approach a development bank like EBRD. We can help find and in many cases finance feasibility study consultants, which develop both long-term investment program and from this long-term investment program identify priority investment measures. We help establish project implementation units and support their activity with project implementation consultants who advise on tender preparation, additional market consultations, contract negotiations, and obviously construction supervision if construction contracts are involved. In some cases, we offer our clients corporate development support programs, which may include development of financial and operational performance improvement program, stakeholder engagement plans, corporate development plans, and public service contracts between municipal companies and municipalities. To ensure a more comprehensive sector planning, along with investment projects in public transport, district heating, or solid waste management sectors, we often provide TC grants for the development of sustainable urban mobility plans, regional waste management plans. For instance, the city of Khmelnytsky, it's actually a very good example where we arranged a grant from the EU to cover the whole of Oblast and not just the city in terms of the waste management plan. For district heating, we develop hydraulic models and district heating schemes. Jointly with the Eastern Europe Energy Efficiency and Environment Partnership, also known as E5P, we are planning to initiate a comprehensive TC related to the development of water and the wastewater sector in Ukraine. Given the circumstances in Ukraine, without a doubt, the development of such plans should be financed from the technical assistance grants. However, for the territorial development and sustainable recovery of districts, it is probably imperative to attract private capital. And of course, it is much easier for private capital to come if there are approved plans regarding the development of city infrastructure. I hope I have addressed your question.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm conscious that just to follow up on that question, quite a few people referred to green infrastructure, which tends to be incredibly difficult to finance. Have you any recent examples where you financed a green infrastructure project? And perhaps you could tell the audience a little bit about that. I'm just conscious that I've seen it in the Mentimeter that green infrastructure was a favorite.
Okay, let me start by saying that there are many general challenges deriving from the limited revenues and debt-taking capacity of municipalities, internal regulations and subsidized tariffs for key municipal services such as public transportation or district heating. It is always challenging to find an investor for a project without any obvious guaranteed financial return or clear mechanism for such return, even if such a project has huge externalities like greenhouse gas emission reductions, environmental and social benefits. When we, as an international financial institution, develop projects with municipalities, first of all, we try to address their needs and challenges, and then we integrate green and sustainable solutions in such projects. Let me give you a few concrete examples of sustainable projects in Ukraine. Due to the attacks on the energy infrastructure, sustainable provision of critical municipal services, which depends upon electricity supply, is now the key priority for Ukrainian municipalities. To address this issue, we have arranged a combination of loan and grant financing for the cities of Zhytomyr and Ternopil, to build biomass-fired combined heat and power plants that use locally and sustainably produced biomass. These CHPs will simultaneously improve energy resilience of the cities and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. During the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Berlin earlier this year, we signed loan and grant agreements with the city of Lutsk, which envisage blended financing, I mean loan, investment grant, and TC grants, which will be used to modernize the city's district heating system. The modernization will include diversification of heat generation sources through introduction of a new biomass-fired boiler house and introduction of heat pumps. Among other things, the project stipulates installation of a new monitoring and control system, also known as SCADA, which should optimize heat generation and supply, reduce the number of necessary personnel at boiler houses, and reduce, excuse me, the number of trips to verify operation of individual and centralized heat substations. So by introducing the SCADA, we address the other current challenge of the city, which is a lack of qualified personnel due to the ongoing conscription to the army. Moreover, jointly with the city, we consider mechanisms how we can reintegrate war veterans as operators of the system. In the city of Mykolaiv, which suffered heavily from the Russian shelling and rocket attacks, the water intake system has been completely destroyed. Jointly with the government of Denmark, which provides significant investment grants to Mykolaiv Oblast, and Eastern Europe Energy Efficiency and Environment Partnership, we are planning to install a new, much more energy efficient water intake and supply system, which should improve water quality and reduce energy consumption. In the city of Lviv, jointly with NEFCO and E5P Fund, which I have already mentioned, we finance a biogas project on the basis of wastewater treatment plant of the city. It is actually our 8th or 9th project in the city of Lviv. By the way, another financial instrument that we have successfully used to provide additional benefits for the high-risk municipal clients during the last 2 years are sovereign guarantees from the developed countries, which allowed us to reduce the interest rates to the clients and increase the size of the projects, which in particular include green elements. Obviously, our municipal infrastructure projects have a great demonstration and catalyst potential. They stimulate contractors from various countries to enter new markets, sometimes during highly volatile periods. If they see that the project is financed by the EBRD or the World Bank or the EIB, contractors have more confidence in the tender transparency and availability of financing. So this is my answer.
So, and you've highlighted many challenges there. The issue of transparency, perhaps you could elaborate a little bit on that in terms of, you were talking about if the EBRD or the EIB or the World Bank is engaged, that gives some confidence that transparency is in place that they need. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about that. And the other thing that you mentioned, which is very important, the EBRDs need to generally have one of the major sort of G7 countries support their loans in more risky environments. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I can say that for each of the projects, we develop a set of formal monitoring indicators which depend upon the sector and project scope. It can include indicators showing high quality of potable water compliant with the EU standards, of high wastewater treatment plants efficiency, or more energy efficient heat supply and CO2 emission reduction, or improved public transportation network. Speaking about transparency and accountability, every quarter or every half a year, we request project progress reports from municipal enterprises implementing projects. We prepare our internal reports and reports for donors co-financing projects based on the monitoring visits. We involve project implementation support consultants in monitoring compliance with environmental and social action plans, as well as safety regulations. We carefully monitor issues related to goods and works of procurement and integrity of our clients, consultants and contractors. And of course, we have grievance mechanisms where stakeholders can complain if they see that something is going wrong. For complicated projects with potential environmental and social consequences, we have obligatory public consultations. Bankers often participate in meetings with various non-governmental organizations and Bankwatch to have their feedback. So accountability and transparency is in the blood of EBRD staff, if I may say so.
Yeah. And also just building on that, it would be really important if you could tell us about metrics that cities should use to measure success of sustainable finance and urban development.
Good question. In my personal humble opinion, the most important indicator is satisfied residents of the city. If for many years city residents had to ride in 30-year-old broken buses or trolley buses, and the result of a public transport project, people now use new low-floor trolley buses with properly functioning heat and air conditioning systems, easy access for people with disabilities or women with strollers. When the trolley buses are equipped with Wi-Fi and have clear information about bus stops and arrival times, the stops have bright and energy-efficient lights. Public transport routes are optimized, taking into consideration the needs of the residents. Then the residents feel satisfied. Just to share my personal experience, I will never forget my trip in the first tram going to Sikhiv district in the city of Lviv, jointly with the mayor of the city, contractors, consultants, and other key stakeholders. Residents of this district have waited for a new tram line for more than 20 years. Each sometimes spending hours in traffic jams. It took a few more years after we've got this project to build this new tram line and commission new trams. But we were greeted like heroes in the first tram. Thousands of people on the streets stopped to applaud the first tram while it was moving, and their reaction was not staged. It was an unforgettable moment. So when I spend evenings or weekends reviewing documents with disbursement applications and implementation reports, and I get tired of, I recall these moments. But obviously, as I mentioned earlier, for each project, we have a formal monitoring indicators, and we try to control them on a quarterly basis.
That's a lovely story. So basically, you're telling the cities aim for very satisfied citizens within your cities, and you'll equally have very satisfied EBRD bankers, which is great to hear. So obviously, in the program that you have, the EBRD Green Cities program, there's a lot of emphasis on sustainability. And what I'd love to hear from you is, how can sustainable finance strategies ensure that urban development projects or the pipeline of projects is not only environmentally responsible, but also socially inclusive, benefiting all communities, and particularly thinking about the most vulnerable populations? Now, you did touch upon it a little bit already, talking about how you included veteran populations in Ukraine, but it would be great to hear your thoughts.
Well, to the best of my knowledge, EBRD is probably the only international financial institution which assesses and calculates a so-called transition impact score for each investment project. One of the transition impact qualities is inclusiveness. We have a dedicated team of experts in the bank which verifies each project concept, and jointly with the client and the banking team identifies actions necessary to improve transition impact, including inclusiveness outcome. Very often, our loan agreements contain specific inclusiveness obligations. We call them covenants, which must be performed by our clients. Let me give you a few examples. To improve safety of passengers and drivers of public transport, clients undertake obligations to install cameras and panic buttons in the transport. To improve accessibility of public transport for people with disabilities, women with strollers, or elderly people, clients purchase low-floor trolley buses using their co-financing. We encourage clients to provide additional trainings for personnel, in particular targeting more vulnerable groups. Clients undertake development of gender and social inclusion policies as a precondition for loan tranche commitments. We encourage introduction and improvement of grievance mechanisms and development of codes of conduct for personnel to exclude of gender-based harassment and violence. As you mentioned, in Ukraine, we've now encouraged introduction of courses for integration of war veterans. So these are just a few examples of our approaches to inclusiveness.
Incredibly interesting. And I often hear from some of your colleagues about, you know, when a project goes to the board, that they really interrogate that the project is in compliance with the Paris Agreement, but equally that it's meeting these inclusive metrics, which is really, really important. A quick question just on, you know, we've seen the various asset classes that people were putting forward that they were looking to finance. Some were in renewable energy, some were in green infrastructure, and there was green buildings in there, etc. And waste projects. Just wondering, from your perspective, what types of infrastructure asset classes do you think are easiest to finance, and what require greater work?
It's a tough question. I mean, there is no super easy project. Maybe perhaps sometimes it's easier to finance projects related to the purchase of goods. For instance, if you need to replace obsolete buses with new buses, or new trolley buses or new trams, such projects are usually less complicated. But if you need to rehabilitate a landfill or build a new sanitary engineered landfill, a new waste management plant, or build a new cogeneration plant, these projects are much more complicated because they require very comprehensive preparation in terms of environmental due diligence, social due diligence. If you need to resettle of some population, of course, you need to develop resettlement plans, and it includes an extra level of complication. So, but we're not afraid of such projects. It's our task to help cities to implement complicated environmental projects. I just recall the situation in Khmelnytsky where we had an old gas pipeline underneath of the old landfill, 60-year-old landfill. So we had to find a solution how to move this gas pipeline to other location in order to rehabilitate this landfill. So this is just an example of challenges we face on a daily basis, jointly with our clients, of course.
You have everything from waste hazard to issues as a result of a major crisis that's happened in a country. So you're able to take on all of those challenges, which is great to hear. And of course, we have many cities on the call who are not just in Ukraine, but they're also in wider Eastern Europe, the Balkans, Eurasia. So it would be great, perhaps, if you could tell them a little bit about what EBRD's focus and priorities are with the Green Cities programme, but indeed more widely in the EBRD in the wider region.
Well, one of the key priorities is to ensure that projects are energy efficient. We try to minimize electricity consumption, natural gas consumption. Obviously, we try to switch from coal in many countries of our operation in order to significantly improve environment in these countries. But in general, we focus on 5 sectors, which are district heating, water and wastewater, solid waste management, of public transport, as I mentioned earlier, and energy efficiency in public buildings. However, we are open to some other ad hoc projects related to the development of green zones in various cities. It really depends on the needs of a concrete city. And as I said, when we understand these needs, we try to integrate some green and sustainable elements in such projects based on our experience in other countries of operation.
Sorry, just to repeat those 5 for everybody who's in the audience. You said district heating, water and waste management, energy efficiency in public buildings. Was it transport, you said?
Yes, public transport and
Public
energy
transport.
efficiency in public buildings.
Perfect. Okay, so that's great. And I'm aware, for example, in Tirana, in Albania, that you have been doing work there with the city on an orbital forest, trying to bring forward a plan for an orbital forest. So it's great to see that you are starting to do more work in the green zone place as well. So that's super, super important. So listen, Igor, thank you so much for your comments. I'm going to try and recap what I heard from you. And so first of all, I think what I heard from you was no project is too difficult for the EBRD. The EBRD will support you, first of all, in creating a vision for the future of your city and the transformation of your city through the Green City, the GCAP, the Green City Action Plan. That will identify all of the environmental risks that you have in your city. It will identify the critical projects that you need to focus on to bring about the transition. It also will focus on financing those projects. And in some cases, in high-risk countries, that financing of the EBRD is backed up often by a G7 country. And you gave the example of Denmark earlier on, but it's often a G7 country that provides that security to enable the EBRD to lend for that particular project. You heard about that the EBRD has an interest in lending, particularly in the area of district heating, water and wastewater, energy efficiency, public transport, but also they're increasingly moving into offering finances for green zones. And I just gave an example of the orbital forest project in Albania, in Tirana, Albania, which they have been focused on. And they're ready and willing to work with you to provide you with that technical support, recognizing that cities are lacking the capacity often within their city to ensure that a project is properly financed and to make it what financiers will call bankable. I think one thing that we always hear from the private sector finance world in particular is we have lots of money, we have a lack of bankable projects. And what I will say to you is they don't go searching for those projects. They don't have time to do that. And they expect the projects to come to them ready-made. So it's critically important that you are guided by the right resources if you are looking to attract sustainable finance for your project. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Aditi. We have a little bit more time to hear from you, our lovely audience, and ask the questions that you want asked of Igor. Thank you so much, Igor. Aditi, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Igor and Alice, for this conversation. Extremely insightful, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions, reflections. So if anybody has any quick comments, questions for the panelists, please raise your hand. So just feel free to unmute and jump in or drop it in the chat, whatever works best. Any questions?
Hello, may I make a question?
Yes, Arlinda. Hi, go for it.
Hi, I'm interested in the Tirana orbital forest. What is the bankable site of the project?
I don't know if you're familiar with the project, but I know that the project has been incredibly difficult to finance. So I don't know if you're familiar with it, and if you can
No, I
comment
just
further.
searched for it and I opened Google. I'm just reading about it as an idea, but since you mentioned it and you are working with them, I just wanted to know what, because usually this kind of project have the biggest challenge is to be financed or to be structured as bankable. So.
Well, I heard that it was a difficult project to develop and implement. But since I'm not an operation leader for this project and I have not been involved in its development, it's a little bit tricky for me to comment on it. If you can leave your coordinates, I will be happy to get in touch with the banker who was responsible for this project, and they will be happy to provide more details on its implementation.
What would be interesting, maybe more generally, Igor, is to talk about nature-based solutions projects and the difficulty in financing them, because there isn't an obvious revenue. It might be useful for the wider audience if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes, and mention some successful cases, if any.
I see. In essence, such projects require blended financing. I believe that in addition to the loans, and we need to identify a proper borrower in this case, which is always a challenge. But in addition to a loan, we definitely need to attract investment grants for such projects and look for the opportunities for private capital. Maybe combine these projects with the development of some elements of, I don't know, for private shops or other things which are useful for business. But it's indeed tricky, and I believe that the cities or municipal companies should be the primary borrowers in this case, because after all, the municipalities are interested in these projects, and eventually municipalities will benefit financially from such projects, because greener areas mean that there will be more of residents in such cities, wealthy residents, and these wealthy residents will pay taxes in such cities. So there is a clear link between implementation of green projects and the development of cities. These developments, they bring wealth eventually to municipalities. It's not a quick connection. It usually takes time. But for such investments pay off.
Diti?
Yes, thank you so much. Any more questions? If you can't unmute, also feel free to drop it in the chat and we'd be happy to take it up.
Whilst they're being quiet, you talked a little bit about waste management, but I was also conscious that in the Mentimeter, there was a number of cities were thinking about the financing of waste management projects. Perhaps you can talk a little bit more about that, of your experience of financing waste management projects.
When we approach waste management projects, we try to provide a comprehensive solution for the city, which means not only construction of a new sanitary landfill, or not only purchase of new waste collection vehicles. First of all, we start with proper organization of waste collection. We need to introduce waste separation at source. So we talk a lot with municipalities regarding launching of special public awareness of campaigns aimed at preparing of the population of the cities for the district for the separation waste at source. And of course, we need to pay significant attention to the processing of solid waste before it goes to the landfill. So we try to introduce such solutions as construction of material recovery facilities or mechanical and biological treatment plants. So every project which we assess has three elements: waste collection, waste transportation, and ultimately waste processing and landfilling. And of course, when we see that some of the landfills have reached their level of their full capacity, we need to think about rehabilitation of this landfills in accordance with the European standards. But such projects are probably one of the most challenging ones due to various environmental issues. Very often old landfills have leachate ponds, and we need to arrange proper leachate treatment systems using the new technologies. So under any conditions, when we launch such projects, we try to engage professional consultants which have developed many waste projects, and they recommend best solutions given the situation on the ground.
Thank you for that. Aditi.
Yes, there is a question in the chat. Anshuman is asking if you could give more information on which infrastructure asset classes or areas have most funds allocated, therefore have a greater chance of getting financed.
Well, I wouldn't say that some areas have more funds allocated. We are ready to finance any municipal project as long as we see that it has certain environmental and social benefits for the city, and we see a mechanism how the loan can be returned. So don't think that we have more money for transport projects or less money for district heating. It doesn't work this way. You can approach us with any project that you actually need. Of course, eventually, when we discuss the concept of the project, we can adjust some elements. For instance, some companies approached us with a district heating project. They wanted just to replace some district heating networks or put new burners into the gas-fired boilers. But eventually, we added some other elements to such projects as the dispatch and monitoring systems or installation of individual heat substations or diversification of fuel supply. But these elements were introduced on the basis of comprehensive feasibility study. However, as I said, we're open to projects in any municipal sector. Please approach us. Please reach out.
Thank you so much.
Daisy?
Yeah, just additionally, there is another question, and we touched upon this a little bit during the conversation, but Anton is asking, what are some of the priorities of EBRD in the Eastern Europe region? You did talk a little bit about waste and water management, energy efficiency. So anything else that you'd like to highlight here?
Well, I think I've already mentioned 5 sectors, 5 subsectors we're working in. I can repeat them. This for water and wastewater management, district heating, energy efficiency, solid waste management, and energy efficiency in public buildings. However, when we look at the transition impact of our projects, it's imperative for us to ensure that the projects are aligned with the Paris Agreement. Starting from 2023, all our projects are supposed to be fully aligned with the Paris Agreement. So it's critical to calculate CO2 emission reduction if it's there for each of the project, and to make sure there are no elements which result in the significant increase of CO2 emissions. And I think I have already elaborated on the inclusiveness element of the projects. We have also so-called gender tagging to ensure that we support development of women, of their career progression and other factors. And we assess all the projects in terms of environmental benefits. It's especially important for wastewater projects. We have a number of wastewater projects in Ukraine right now we're working at. When we finance public transport projects, of course, we avoid old means of public transportation like diesel buses. We try to concentrate on electrical buses or trolley buses or trams or metro. So these are the key priorities for the bank.
Can I ask you just to perhaps describe some of the types of district heating projects that you finance as well? Like, of course, it's a very old technology. It's been around for 100 years, but it's often not something that's widely used in cities. It would be great to hear some practical examples there for the audience.
It is actually widely used in Ukraine. The majority of cities have inherited the district heating systems from the Soviet Union. But although this is an old technology, it's probably one of the best technologies to integrate green solutions, because you cannot install a large heat pump or biomass boiler or other green elements in each apartment. You need to combine the efforts and the district heating systems. They offer such solutions to integrate some of green elements like heat pumps. They're getting quite popular. Biomass-fired boilers or biomass-fired cogeneration plants. In places where there is a high level of solar insolation, you can install solar panels to heat hot water. It's getting quite popular, especially in the southern parts. And using the district heating network, you can easily distribute heat from alternative sources, such as burning of RDF or some other elements. It's done in many northern countries like Denmark and Sweden. So for district heating systems, they really offer unique opportunity to integrate some green generating sources and use heat from places like iron mills or other plants.
Yeah, I think it's a super interesting one, because also one of the things that we're seeing is with the rise of AI that more and more technology companies are developing data centers, which of course have a huge amount of excess heat. So, you know, for the cities who are part of this call, if you're being approached by those technology companies to build data centers, for example, make sure that you're leveraging them for district heating from the very beginning. And I think it's something that that the EBRD could definitely assist you with. Perhaps you could also tell us a little bit more, Igor, you were mentioning earlier about the great pleasure that you got in delivering that new public transport system in Lviv. And, after that day, what happens? How does the EBRD follow a project after it operates? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, of course. We monitor all our projects until the full repayment of the loan, and it usually takes up to 13 or 15 years to fully repay the loan. It means that we've asked the clients to prepare the reports. We assess the problems, if there are any problems with public transport. And when we collect this information, we try to use the lessons learned and integrate some better solutions in subsequent projects. So returning to district heating, by the way, we've noticed the large savings from the introduction of demand management measures, such as introduction of individual heat substations. And we try to replicate the massive installation of individual heat substations in other district heating projects. They replace centralized heat substations, and they allow the switch from the 4-pipe district heating system to 2-pipe district heating system, which provides additional savings in terms of gas and electricity consumption. So for the same approach in public transport, we now try to integrate comprehensive public transport management measures and traffic models. In many transport projects, we include TCs that stipulate development of traffic models and optimization of public transport routes for the cities. And of course, it's very beneficial for the city residents. They see that cities not only have new buses or trolley buses, but they see that the routes have been changed for their benefit.
Great. And just recognizing that you said there's 5 core areas that you focus on. So we've talked about district heating, we've talked about waste. We haven't really touched upon water or energy efficiency in public buildings projects. And I'm also very conscious that the cities who are part of this group often have buildings, public buildings that are in need of being much more efficient. Could you give just 1 or 2 examples of how you finance there?
Sure. We have several projects in Ukraine related to financing of thermal modernization of buildings. It usually includes installation of building facades, of installation of roofs, installation of individual heat substations if buildings are connected to the district heating network, replacement of windows, replacement of lights in such buildings. In certain cases, we put solar panels on the roofs and introduce some other green elements. But everything starts with energy audit. It's important to make sure that each building has results of energy audit, for which provides an opportunity to develop concrete measures which will lead to energy efficiency. And in some cases, we use ESCO, quasi-ESCO contracts when contractors bear some responsibility for the achieved results. In other words, in addition to the standard payment for the services, they may receive some extra benefits if significant energy savings are achieved. Speaking about water and wastewater sector, of course, we have projects of both in related to water supply. We again, it depends on the requirements of the city, but we can finance replacement of pumps for installation of frequency regulation. If we see that a particular city has issues with water quality, we discuss various options with our consultants, how we can improve this water quality at the lowest possible cost using various modern technologies, of course, verified technologies. And as to the wastewater treatment, now we have a variety of projects related to the replacement of grid chambers, sedimentation tanks, aeration units. Where possible, we consider biogas projects and installation of renewable energy solutions like potentially solar panels, wind farms where it makes sense.
Great, thank you for that, Igor. Aditi, I don't know if there's any more questions.
No questions in the chat. Irakli, please go ahead.
I have a question, if I may. I also want to ask one question, if I may.
Of course, go ahead.
Dear, I would like to greet you once more, and I want to extend my deep gratitude for arranging these online workshops, international seminars. It's absolutely critically helpful for us in the process of accumulating knowledge and obtaining new knowledge. I want to inform you that within the frameworks of UNDP project funded by EU, Kutaisi Municipality City Hall became a winner of a competition, and we developed municipality transformation portfolio where we implemented several green interventions in the city. The most important is that the building of our municipal transport department is transformed to a green building, and renewable energy is provided there. We have solar energy here, and it's a really good example, and it's a really good demonstration practice for our city and region. And we wish to implement same approach in other buildings as well. Kindergartens, for example, social houses, administrative buildings, different public buildings, yeah. And within the frameworks of this grant project, we have also good initiatives for promoting cars. We have installed chargers for e-cars, and electricity transport is increased now in our city, and a local government also made free parking spaces for owners of electronic cars. So we have also implemented the modern separation project as well, and on 21 locations of the city we have special separation containers, and we're giving a good example of that. We teach our population how to separate waste. So we have really good examples with the support of UNDP. We have also laboratories, and I have a question for a future when we move to further phases for development. What could be practical, particular role of our EBRD for our municipalities? I want to extend my deep gratitude to EBRD because EBRD and Municipal Development Fund gave us opportunity in Kutaisi to buy 60 Euro 5 class buses. And now Kutaisi population is traveling via modern buses. And of course, transport policy is fully changed, and we're continuing our work in cooperation with UN, EBRD and Municipal Development Fund. International company Sistra helps us with development of modern municipal transport policy based on a modern experience. We had study visits in Lietuva, in Cyprus, and now Kutaisi plans to make very serious steps in this direction. We have great desire to speak about electronic buses and we are procuring electronic mobile within one project, and we believe that EBRD will propose new initiatives. We want 40 new electronic buses for our city, somehow to meet our ambitions, because we have ambition to transform Kutaisi into green city. And could we know about particular role of EBRD with this? Thank you.
The city was demonstrating the amazing work that they were doing, Igor. I think they were asking, thanking you for your support as well, and asking what additional supports that you could provide. And I think the example of electric buses was also cited. Igor.
Well, I fully support the intention of Kutaisi to become a green city. We have a very professional, sustainable infrastructure of group bankers in Georgia. And I highly recommend you to approach our sustainable infrastructure group bankers there and discuss the opportunities for new projects in Kutaisi. I'm sure that jointly you will be able to find some good solutions.
Thank you. Aditi, I don't know if there's any further questions.
No questions in the chat, but a last call for anybody who'd like to ask a question over Zoom. If not, I will hand it over to Julia to take us through some parts of the closing.
Yes. Thank you all for this very interesting conversation and for the question that you were asking. I think this was a perfect closure for our 3 steps conversation that we had together, in which we were putting together the question on how to build a proper proposal that will attract the interest of founders. And we had today EDRB that was actually highlighting what they are looking for and how they are supporting cities in their endeavor. And last week, talking about sustainable finances, we were already understanding a topic that we touched base today also in saying that you might rely on different funding streams to fully fund your proposal and your activity. We are ready to close, but before that, I would like to invite you once again to a short exercise on Mentimeter again. You can see here the QR code and the code to join. I will then leave the screen to Aditi that will help me with the moderation of it. And then I'm going to leave the floor to Aditi for some final remarks. We have a very first simple question. We are going to ask you how you felt during today's session. We know that it was very full of information and practical example from the different area and region where you come from. So we would like to understand if you was like excited to follow, if you were feeling overwhelmed by the amount of information that you received, if you got some clarity, or how do you feel? You can just put your mouse over it and see how you are going to connect with that. I'm seeing some pointers. Seems like that you were able to follow and enjoy the conversation, which is very interesting. Maybe there are also some delay with the responses. So eventually this will be open a bit longer and we can share with you what do you think in the long term can be the thing. The second question that we would like to ask you is what are the key takeaways that you get from today's session, and to understand where are the keywords. I think we must have some slight problem. I see only 2 people entering in the Mentimeter and not yet responses coming. So eventually you can see on the top of the slide again that there is the code to access to the slides. You can go on menti.com and then the code is 67349190.
The presenter hasn't changed slides yet. I just tried it.
I don't know if Aditi, you see any problem in the Mentimeter?
No, for me, it's the second slide on takeaways. But in case it's not accessible, maybe we do a closing in general and skip the Mentimeter for now.
Yes, eventually you can write it in the chat.
We see just first question. We do not have access from Georgia Irakli says. They do not have access to Mentimeter.
Okay, now something is coming up. So we have the possibilities, green energy, green transition. Yes, those were powerful words that were coming out. Eventually, if you cannot access the Mentimeter, you feel free to write them in chat. We can also take them from there if we have a technical problem with it. No project is too difficult. I also appreciated that gives hope when we are thinking about complex problem and knowing that there is someone ready to support you in the challenges that you're facing when you have high ambition. Helpful, great, useful. Perfect. I think that we are very happy to see that we had the chance to share some knowledge with you. So thank you for being with us. I would leave now the floor to Aditi for the final remarks on how we are closing these 3 sessions. Thank you, Aditi.
Thank you so much, Julia. Before we go to some next steps, I would like to thank Alice and Ihor for joining us today and sharing your insights around the topic of green and sustainable finance. Additionally, I would also like to thank Julia and Sarah for taking lead on facilitation, Anshuman, Anton, all the country office colleagues, and the interpreters for being with us throughout the 3 sessions and really managing all the back end and being the backbone of the series. As next steps, just letting you know that this entire package of sessions, recordings, the templates that we saw across the 3 sessions, tools, all of this will be available on the Urban Learning Center. We are currently working on preparing that for you. So once it is ready, we will share the link that you can access maybe in the next week or so. And additionally, for everyone who was able to attend all 3 sessions, they will also be receiving a certificate of completion via email in the next few days. In case you haven't, please do get in touch with us and we will take it with you from there. Thank you once again for taking the time out to all the participants and being with us for these 3 Fridays. And I hope the 3 topics were insightful and helpful for you to deep dive into. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.